Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 Kickstarter campaigns that abused the system and pretty much got away with it. Number 10. Potato Salad Guy. Amount raised $55,000.
Back in the halcyon days of 2014, a software developer called Zach Brown logged into Kickstarter and created a campaign asking for $10 so that he could make some potato salad. Like, that was literally it. Zach initially offered backers no stretch goals, additional promises if the campaign gets more funding than expected, and his description of the project simply said, "I'm making potato salad." As is wont to happen in these situations, the internet caught wind of the project and decided that if Zach wanted to make potato salad, he was going to make all of the potato salad, and ended up pledging 5,500 times more money than he asked for, to the tune of $55,492. To Zach's credit, he agreed to give half the money he raised to charity, and he used the rest to fund a potato-themed street party called Potato Stock. In a later interview, Zach explained that he didn't want to milk his 15 minutes of internet fame for personal gain, which would have probably had more impact if he hadn't also revealed in the same interview that the second the campaign started to gain traction, he'd been cold-calling TV studios trying to get himself a job, telling them he was the potato salad guy. But the kicker here is the precedent that Zach's campaign set, because as soon as it went viral, countless other wacky campaigns began appearing on the site, started by people all hoping to cash in on the internet's fickleness, and they're almost all universally just awful.
Number 9. The Doom That Came to Atlantic City. Amount raised $122,874.
The Doom That Came to Atlantic City was initially pitched to the people of Kickstarter as a light-hearted Lovecraftian board game that was paradoxically fun for the whole family, provided your family likes arguing over who gets to play as which unpronounceable ancient old god of misery. Despite the guy who first pitched the campaign, Eric Chevalier, having no experience making a board game whatsoever, 1,246 backers pledged money to make it a reality, because two big-name artists were involved with the project, and come on, how hard is it really to make a board game? Pretty damn hard, as it turns out, because although Chevalier raised almost $100,000 more than what he asked for, his initial goal was $35,000. After 13 months of work, he produced nothing, but still somehow ran out of money and cancelled the project. Chevalier heroically refused to tell backers what he'd done with their money, citing that he couldn't do so for legal reasons. Legal reasons in this case meaning he'd spent the money on himself and didn't want to be sued in a class action lawsuit. The Federal Trade Commission ordered that Chevalier pay back everyone who funded the project, an order which, to the surprise of nobody, Chevalier claimed he wasn't able to follow through on because old habits die hard.
Number 8. The ZPM Espresso Machine. Amount raised $369,569.
Amongst the many stories of Kickstarter failure, the plight of the ZPM Espresso Machine is one of the more depressing because it came like this close to actually being a real thing. In a nutshell, the idea was to create a machine that could produce high-quality espresso that didn't cost the kind of money that would make it difficult to justify not going to the Starbucks every morning instead, an idea some 1,500 backers seemed to like. Most of the campaign's 1,546 backers pledged a couple of $100s apiece, with the implicit understanding that when the project came to fruition, they'd get an espresso machine capable of producing high-quality, scalding hot coffee that they could spit out dramatically while reading the paper. 3 years later, the project was cancelled, and it was announced there'd be no refunds or coffee machines. What makes this project more annoying is that the ZPM Espresso Machine totally worked. It's just that the brains behind the project couldn't figure out a way to make them on a scale or for the price promised, meaning it was ultimately cancelled with nothing to show for it. Backers became even more annoyed when it was revealed that alongside the nearly $400,000 raised via Kickstarter, the ZPM project had raised nearly $1 million via other means, nearly 60 times the initial $20,000 they'd asked for.
Number 7. Postal 2. Amount raised, not enough.
Back in 2013, infamously bad director Uwe Boll decided to dip his toes into the pool of Kickstarter in an attempt to secure funding for the movie Postal 2, a sequel to the critically panned movie based on one of the most offensive video games of all time. What could possibly go wrong? With a humble for a movie goal of $500,000 and some fairly unique backer rewards, exclusive prizes and gifts for pledging a certain amount of money, including a part in the movie, a steal at $500, to a private dinner and movie date with Boll himself, $5,000 and you got to pick the movie. The campaign would have probably been a success if not for one pertinent fact: Uwe Boll movies suck ass. When the project failed to generate the kind of hype Bol had anticipated, and in fact seemed to be generating negative hype, Bol abruptly cancelled the campaign. A few months later, he tried again with a second sequel to his film Rampage, which similarly failed to raise enough money, prompting Bol to swear off the platform forever and release a video addressed to everyone who hadn't financed his films, aptly titled "Fuck You All."
Number 6. Yogventures. Amount raised $567,665.
Pitched as what has been described as a laughably ambitious video game featuring the likenesses of what are apparently some of the most popular and presumably shouty people on YouTube, this campaign had more twists and turns before ending in disaster than a Hot Wheels track made of crazy straws. For starters, Yogscast, the group of YouTube stars lending their likeness to the game and the main reason it secured so much funding in the first place, quickly began distancing themselves from the project as soon as it became clear it wasn't going to be as ambitious as promised. This culminated in the group completely disavowing the company making the game and sending people who paid money to play it a completely different game instead. Yogscast then claimed that the game actually had little to do with them, even though their faces were literally the main selling point, effectively throwing the six-man team making the game to the wolves. After successfully distancing themselves from the failed game, Yogscast then masterfully sidestepped allegations of dishonesty when it emerged they'd received $150,000 of the money from the project, $50,000 of which was unaccounted for by saying there's no value going into detail and then refusing to talk about it anymore. Truly a masterclass in PR we can all learn a lesson from.
Number 5. Synchronized. Amount raised $1,762.
Unlike other entries on this list, not only did this project to raise funds for a short student film raise the full amount and some change, but the campaign creator, Mateusz Shimada, delivered exactly what he promised, a short science fiction piece set in a post-apocalyptic world that was deemed good enough to win first place at Campus Movie Fest, one of the world's largest student film festivals. The problem was that the film Mateusz produced was an almost shot-for-shot rip-off of a French animated film that featured the same plot, visuals, and general tone called Replay. When confronted with the evidence that he'd stolen his idea, Mateusz apologized for not being open with backers, read getting caught, adding that everything I did in complete innocence, because there's absolutely nothing wrong or unethical about plagiarizing someone else's work when using other people's money to win a competition. For some reason, despite claiming that he didn't do anything wrong, Mateusz removed his film from YouTube so he can only like the vastly superior version that he ripped off.
Number 4. myIDkey. Amount raised $473,333.
Like many ideas that appear on Kickstarter, myIDkey was one of those things that you read about and think to yourself, why doesn't this thing exist already? Like a laptop that doesn't keep playing YouTube videos for 20 seconds after you close it, and beer bottles with labels that peel off in one satisfying go. In the most basic sense, myIDkey was a USB stick that when inserted into a computer would automatically and securely enter password and login information while browsing the web, but was locked to your fingerprint so could only work when inserted by you. The simplicity of the idea saw it bring in nearly $500,000 from 3,972 backers. The project later received nearly $3 million additional dollars in funding after being covered extensively by tech sites. Although the project seemed like a slam dunk to most critics, the project continually faltered and missed deadlines, only sporadically updating backers to tell them they were adding new features or updates nobody wanted or asked for. At the time of publication, which is nearly 3 years after the project launched and 2 years after its initial deadline, almost nobody has one of these things, and the few that do report that it either doesn't work, is buggy, or broke after a few days of regular use. Man, it's almost like it would be easier to remember your Facebook password or something.
Number 3. Asylum playing cards. Amount raised $25,164.
The Asylum playing card fiasco is one of the more baffling Kickstarter stories of the last few years because it resulted in the creator being forced to pay back double what they raised to a handful of backers in one specific part of America. The short version is that in 2012, a guy calling himself Ed Nash started a Kickstarter to raise funds to create a deck of playing cards sporting unique horror-themed artwork, most of which was seemingly already done. To be clear, the plan was to create a deck of ordinary playing cards, like the kind you can buy from any store, not to create a new card game like Cards Against Humanity or Exploding Kittens, meaning literally the only thing they had to do was print and deliver them. And yet, for some unknown reason, the company behind the campaign, Altius Management, abruptly stopped communicating with backers after a few months. This apparently irked the state of Washington, who went after the company like a bulldog attacking a slightly smaller bulldog coated in peanut butter, citing that they would not tolerate crowdfunding theft and thus ordering Altius management to pay over $50,000 in damages, twice as much as they'd raised during the campaign itself. That was to be split between the courts and 31 Washington-based backers. This means that each would get $668 regardless of how much they actually pledged. The lesson here obviously being, if you're going to rip someone off, make sure you don't live in Washington.
Number 2. Eye3 Drone. Amount raised $78,481.
While watching this video, you may have noticed that every one of the campaigns we've noted at the very least produced something, even if it was just excuses, which has probably left you thinking, has anyone ever just tried to take the money and run? To which the answer is, of course. The Eye3 Drone Kickstarter campaign was such a transparent attempt to scam early tech adopters who don't know better from their money that it'd make Apple stop and think. The campaign promised to deliver a low-cost drone that could fly itself while carrying a professional-grade camera for users who wanted to film things from the air but preferred to let a robot handle the cinematography. Almost immediately, drone experts pulled the campaign apart after discovering that every piece of promotional material was of another drone consumers could buy for less. Kickstarter stepped in and refunded everyone's money. The team behind the Eye3 insisted that they were, totally on the level, you guys, gosh, and invited people with faith in the project to pledge money via their website. As of today, the website no longer exists.
Number 1. Amanda Palmer. Amount raised $1,192,793.
In 2012, Amanda Palmer, a musician best known for being part of the alt-rock band The Dresden Dolls, as well as some other less commercially successful projects, launched a Kickstarter to fund her new album, asking for a conservative $100,000. Palmer raised 10 times this amount by the time the campaign ended. In a blog post, Palmer noted that $250,000 of the money raised would be spent paying off debts she'd accumulated by not working the previous year and recording the album, which was already finished by the time she posted the Kickstarter. This prompted the question of what exactly she'd have done if she only raised the $100,000 she asked for. Despite the crux of the campaign being that it was about the future of music and taking power away from a corrupt music industry that doesn't pay artists what they're worth, Palmer refused to pay local musicians she recruited to open for her band, instead saying she'd pay them in hugs, beer, and that most valuable commodity exposure, a deal even the freaking New Yorker stated was probably worse than nothing. The end result was that Palmer's tour ended up being a massive success. The Kickstarter is still one of the most popular music projects the site has ever had, and she got to keep an estimated $100,000 of the money she raised for herself. For the curious, Palmer currently has a Patreon where she charges you $1 every time she releases a piece of content, whether it's a song, essay, or old photo she found on a hard drive on her laptop and she thinks is neat. It's when we put together videos like this one that make us think maybe we're in the wrong business.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a like below and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this 7 days a week. And if you liked that video, you'll probably like some of our other videos, which are over there on the right. Be sure to check those out, be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.